Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
I'm Bob Scarborough.
And we are
The
the FAIRtax Guys.
deploying the scrolling banner, which has been scrolled and de-scrolled and unscrolled for many, many times. They last a long time, and you can get it at the FAIRtax store, which is available through fairtax.org. It's one of the tabs at the top. You can go on there and get all kinds of neat stuff that helps put the name of the FAIRtax out there in the public, including the no charge for shipping, no charge for the material, index cards, the business cards, and a palm card that allows you to let people know about the FAIRtax. The promo materials are at fairtaxstore.org.
All
Always free
right.
shipping on all orders.
That's a good deal. That's something that the group in Florida down here, we put a lot of money into that because people think FAIRtax Store, you think a for-profit enterprise. Actually,
Right.
it is not. We do not make any money on that. In fact, we have the Florida FAIRtax Group has to financially support that store. But the name of the game in this case is not to make a profit, but the idea is to get as much, FAIRtax stuff out into people's hands as we can. And so we do this as cheaply as we can for the people. In fact, we sell below cost.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's giving those palm cards and the prebate cards away at no cost and the free shipping. We're certainly that is priced below cost, but
Yeah.
it happens, and we encourage everybody to go to fairtaxstore.org and pick up your FAIRtax stuff and take your scrolling banner to a Wake Forest basketball game and get on
Yes.
television when they are shooting free throws. I'm going to keep kind of needling you on that one.
Well, and I was thinking about this the other day. We can only hope that I would be escorted out of the Joel, the Lawrence Joel Coliseum, by security for holding up this banner and maybe causing some trouble. So I can only hope that I am at least brought out in some sort of fashion where people can see.
Well, I hope they don't mess with you. But anyways, speaking of sports venues, of course, you can see that I've still got my Bryant-Denny Stadium background up, and I
Yes.
know there has got to be a Vanderbilt fan out there somewhere who is going to give me a lot of grief because I know that Alabama lost to Vanderbilt. Last time that happened, Ronald Reagan was president.
Yeah,
So that doesn't happen very often, but who knows? That's just a game. It has nothing to do with the FAIRtax. Let's get going. And unfortunately, I think there at Bryant-Denny Stadium you cannot get cheer wine, so I have to bring my own cheer wine.
yeah, man, that stuff's great.
Oh, it
And
is.
they have it in the fountain at Mr. Barbecue, and at some
Yes,
time, and when we do the live FAIRtax Power Radio show from WTOB in Winston-Salem the next day, the
yes. So
next we're
actually, if things go according to plan, this program is going to stream on Tuesday the 22nd, which
yeah.
means that 2 days ago, we were there at WTOB. Next week on FAIRtax Power Radio, we will show you the video of that program. Yesterday, we loaded up on Mr. Barbecue. And this afternoon, I was on a Delta Airlines Boeing 717 flying back home from Florida. So whatever that's worth.
Yeah, that
But
just so everybody knows our schedule.
we
And
need to get in. We need to get into the program here on FAIRtax Power Radio. And as we always love to do, dig into congress.gov to start with and see what the Congress critters are up to. And let's see if we can get through this fairly quickly. We've already killed a little bit of time here. But the first one on the list for today is H.R. 9937 from Representative Sykes in Ohio. Bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to deny interest and depreciation deductions for taxpayers owning 50 or more single family properties. I.e., let's sock it to those rich landlords, those evil rich landlords that own all this property and they are, ripping off all their tenants and stuff. So we're not going to let them have this tax deduction for interest and depreciation. Don't you just love it when people try to push a political agenda using the tax code?
I don't think it's something that's fair. Uh, to the people that don't get the benefit that is being pushed. But when you think about the lobbyist relationship with our representatives, we elect them. They have to have the lobbyists to dole out the money for the very, very expensive reelection campaigns, which the raising of that money starts the minute they get put into office, and it's an ongoing promotion. So the challenges for us with regard to the relationship between the lobbyists and our elected officials, obviously, those are where we find the greatest difficulty. And we always say, let's just get rid of the income tax altogether. The tax code goes away. We have a much fairer, simpler, visible way to collect revenue for the government through the fair tax.
All right. Well, this one obviously is just go back to a constituent and say, yeah, I'm trying to sock it to the big evil rich folks. Let's move on. H.R. 9935 is the next one to amend the Internal Revenue Code to establish a refundable tax credit for the addition of skirting to certain manufactured homes. I'm not sure there's a whole lot we can comment on that one, but that's you get a tax break if you put skirting around your manufactured home.
Just in case you don't have a brick foundation, you're still on DOT time with the wheels on your mobile home. The aluminum in some cases skirting that goes around it. That's a benefit, but why in the tax code?
Who knows? Next one, HR 9843 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to get this, incentivize the divestiture of certain securities connected to the People's Republic of China. Apparently, there are people there who do not want Americans investing in Chinese companies, and so they are going to use the tax code to try to get you to divest yourself of those particular investments that are related to companies from the People's Republic of China. Now we can. That's we'll let that one pass with no comment. HR 9838 is the next one to amend the Internal Revenue Code to provide for an end date for the credit for certain qualified carbon oxide and for other purposes. We've mentioned carbon oxide before, and that's in the tax code. But this one is one that this one really caught my eye that I want to might spend a little extra time on this one. This is HR 9799. Remember, we were talking with Steve Hayes a couple of weeks ago about the no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime, stuff like that. Well, here's HR 9799, the Overtime Pay Tax Relief Act of 2024. So you would think that if you listen to the political rhetoric that we don't want to tax overtime, that they were exempting overtime from taxation. But be careful of what the politicians say versus what they actually put in the bill. Because if you open this up and you see, instead of just exempting overtime pay from taxation, this bill amends the Internal Revenue Code to establish a deduction for certain overtime payment. The deduction, of course, means that you can subtract the amount of the deduction from your taxable income. It reduces the amount of taxable income that you have, but this is not a exempting overtime from taxation in its entirety. It says what's really interesting, a little bit farther on down there, this thing is limited. It says, for the no deduction shall be allowed under subsection A above, in the case of a married couple filing jointly that makes $200,000 or more, head of household $150,000 or more, or in the case of any other individual, $100,000 or more. So no tax on overtime is no, we're going to let you deduct your overtime, but if you make above these limits, you get nothing.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Of course, the beauty of all that is the fair tax throws every bit of that out the window into the tea can. And so you don't tax income at all, no matter where you make it from, no matter, whatever its source is. The fair tax taxes you only when you choose to make a retail purchase of new goods and retail services. So all of this junk that they're trying to do with the tax code goes away with a fair tax. And I say, if we're talking to Steve again a couple of weeks ago, if it's a good idea not to tax tips, if it's a good idea not to tax overtime, if it's a good idea not to tax Social Security benefits, why is it not a good idea not to tax any income at all? So that maybe is a question we still might have time to ask some of these political candidates. We're not quite to the election yet. It's coming up in a couple of weeks, but
And
that's just a thought.
a lot of
Yes.
folks are already voting.
Hmm.
Carolina is not until the middle of October. When this show airs, will be a few days past the actual start. But it's important to exercise your right to vote. Make sure that, and in North Carolina, it's interesting because you get to, if you go to the early voting and you're not registered, you will be able to register to vote on that day that you show up at the polling place for early voting. And then they go through a process by making sure you're who you say you are.
Yeah.
And by the time your vote gets counted, you've been registered. So that was a pretty nice incentive for those folks that have not registered. I don't know if it's like that in any or many other states, though.
Here we go. That's good. All right. Well, that's going to do it for Congress.gov this week. But just beware of, as they say, what the big print giveth, the fine print taketh away. What the politician says and what actually comes out of the bill are not necessarily the same thing. We'll keep an
That's
eye
right.
out on that and see how that goes. But we want to dig back into the research library at fairtax.org. Fairtax.org is a tremendous resource for people who want to educate themselves on the fair tax to begin with. If you're not really sure how it works, there's a very extensive FAQ there that you can just read through and get a really good feel for how the fair tax works and all. If you want to get into some thicker weeds on there, they have the research library. And you'll hear Steve Hayes if you listen to the chairman's report or read the chairman's report. Every week, Steve is encouraging people to join the 1040 Club, Fred's $10.40 a month to help get the fair tax passed. He's always saying, we don't use that money for salaries. We're all volunteers, but we need to update our economic studies. And I will admit right out of the box here that a lot of the articles that you'll find in the fairtax.org research library have some age on them. But of course, the concepts are still sound, although some of the actual numbers might be a bit outdated. But we're going to be looking at a thing out there that was written by Dr. Walby, Dr. Karen Walby. And let's see, scroll down to the bottom. This was, what's the date on it? February 2013. So these numbers are, over a decade old, but it's still a good idea. The fair tax reduces the tax burden for low and middle income households. We hear all the time people who don't understand how the fair tax works. Oh, the fair tax is regressive. The sales tax hurts the poor. So on and on and on. But Dr. Walby here has done a good bit of academic research to show how the fair tax actually reduces the tax burden for low and middle income households. So the politicians that claim to be champions of low and middle income households ought to be latching on to the fair tax.
Very true. And I think we're getting to a point with the amount of debt that the country is carrying. Interest on that debt is equal to, I heard in a report the other day, the budget of the military, of the Department of Defense, and the challenges in what we're doing with the money that we're sending to Washington is almost to the point of being unmanageable, I feel. And so the fair tax is a perfect way to change the trajectory of tax collection and put it back in our control. And by doing so, getting rid of a lot of loss due to duplication of with the fraud, evasion, and things like that, with regard to not paying taxes, plus the addition of international travelers, migrants that aren't documented, and so on. are in the cash economy now will have all of that benefit to come in. So we're talking about low and middle income households today in this report, and how the fair tax reduces that burden. And I think that's important. An important component is one of the things that the media latches onto with regard to why you don't want to support the fair tax is because of how it affects low and middle income households. This is a great topic for today on our program. So I'll let you kick off the review of the article.
Well, they're talking about, how do you measure the tax burden on people? And this article by Dr. Walby says, is the quoting here, the changes should be measured as the effects on everyone's net of tax income after all economic adjustments have run their courses. So she's going by something called the average remaining lifetime tax rate, are the best estimates of these lifetime consequences. And I don't want to get too awfully far out into the weeds here, but quoting again, to calculate the average lifetime tax rate, we add up all the federal income and payroll taxes a person will pay over the rest of their lives, subtract from it the benefits they receive to get a net taxes to be paid. In the case of the income tax, Social Security benefits are subtracted from taxes paid. In the case of the fair tax rebate is likewise subtracted. So then we compare the net taxes to be paid to the income that they're expected to earn during the rest of their lives. And I know it's kind of hard to do this, especially if you're not looking at the video. This is one of the audio-only podcasts or one of the radio stations. But there's a chart on page 2 of this thing, and I'm going to try. Let's see if I can pull this off to share that screen with you. There it is. So hopefully we've got the put that on share. Now, hopefully everybody can see that chart. And if you can see the difference between the red bar and the green bar, the axis going along the bottom is the annual household income. And then the y-axis, the axis going up, is the tax rate. And Dr. Walby figured out for a family, this is a couple with 2 children. And again, as we said, these numbers are kind of outdated because $20,000 is not a reasonable amount to think that you can survive on a couple with 2 children. I guess it was back over 10 years ago. But a family making $20,000 with the fair tax would have just a 2.4% tax rate versus 7.1% with the income payroll taxes. Now, a lot of people that are, shooting at the fair tax and saying it's regressive, they gloss over, they don't even pay any attention at all to the fact that the payroll taxes that fund Social Security and Medicare that come out of the paychecks of everyone who works for a paycheck, regardless of how much you make, regardless of how big your family is, regardless of anything, that comes out first, and it's the same for everybody. That is textbook regressive, and the fair tax gets rid of those. As you move up the line a little bit, $30,000 worth of annual income yields a 12.6% tax rate under the income tax system, and just a 5%, less than half, 5% under the fair tax. And you go all the way up to the other end of the scale. A household with a 500,000, man, I'd like to be in that group, wouldn't you? If you
I would think so. I could find a lot to do with the money I would save. $500,000 income annual. That's a couple with 2 children. You go from almost 36% tax rate for income tax to just above 21% with the fair tax. 36%, 35.9% with the income tax, 21.1% with the fair tax. And these numbers are a decade old, but the concept and how it works out mathematically stays the same. There's no change from then to today.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, there are going to be politicians out there who will come up, and a lot of their friends in the media will carry their water for them. Anything that helps the high income people is bad and out against it. And but the fair tax, if you again look at this chart, that is a significant reduction in the amount of tax you pay across the entire economic spectrum. And the difference, if you look at the percentage difference on the way at the low end on this $20,000 family, 7.1% versus 2.4%. I mean, the fair tax is you pay about 3 times as much in income tax as you pay in fair tax. But that evens out a little bit as evens out as you go up the scale. The difference between 35 and 21 percentage wise is nowhere near as great as the difference between 7.1 and 2.4. So yes, the fair tax helps everyone, but it helps people at the lower end of the spectrum more so than those on the upper end of the spectrum.
Instantly, you get all of the federal income tax that's taken out of your paycheck back into your paycheck. Consequently, the employer gets that deduction, that withholding that he is responsible for paying for you. He doesn't have to put that into a report and send it in to the Treasury on a monthly or bi-monthly basis, depending on the work. And it's a win-win all around. And your employer may say, well, I'll give you your half of the withholding that I'm not having to pay anymore. And so you get that raise too. May not happen. It's going to be up to your boss. But I'll tell you this, competition is going to bring a challenge for employers to maintain and retain and acquire and attract the best people for the job, in the ability to use that now back in the cash flow of the business, what would have gone to the federal government in paying your federal taxes.
All right, let me turn off this screen share here and get us back to normal. But there we go. I say that those numbers are kind of outdated, but see, the concept is still sound, that the fair tax helps people on the lower end of the economic spectrum more so than people on the upper end of the economic spectrum. But we just got to get through these politicians' heads that, the rising tide floats all boats kind of thing, but they only want to float the rowboats and not the yachts. Unfortunately, but the reality of it is that those who own the yachts are usually employing those who own the rowboats. So what's good across the board is good for everybody. And the fair tax is just so much better than the income tax. We can keep pounding on that and pounding on that and pounding on that until people get it in their heads that the fair tax does not hurt the poor. It does indeed help people at the higher end, which helps people at the lower end as well. But all the way across the board, you saw on that chart that that the fair tax is just extremely more superior to the income tax than we can possibly describe. But again, we'd like to steer people to fairtax.org. There are quite a good number of white papers and academic studies that have been done showing the benefits of the fair tax. We would urge folks to go out to fairtax.org, check that out. And if you can, join the 1040 Club, just $10.40 a month. Obviously, that was a play on the Form 1040, the income tax return, that I think I could probably afford to part $10.40 a month to help the fair tax, and I think you can too. And I'm going to have some more cheerwine.
Fairtax.org has the information on there, the ability to set up an automatic payment every month, $10.40. The research tab that's on there covers agriculture, business, charitable giving, demographics, tax evasion, and more. And you can get on that website and discover a considerable amount of information that's been carefully presented by folks who know what they're talking about when it comes to taxation.
Oh, absolutely. So go check that out. Read through the FAQ. We've done some episodes here on Fairtax Power Radio, actually just reading through the FAQ. It's been a while since we've done that. We may have to go back and do that a time or two and get people educated on the fair, because yes. We've been saying, I mean, ever since Ron Valero and I came up with the saying way back when, the fair tax, once you understand it, you'll demand it. And that is true. It really is. I remember when I first explained the fair tax to my mom, And when the light went on in her head, she figured out how that works. Her jaw kind of dropped and says, why aren't we doing this already? It just makes so much sense from an economic standpoint. It does not make a great deal of sense from the Congress critter standpoint, who are trying to milk lobbyists for campaign cash. So unfortunately, those are the people who write the tax code, and we've got to convince them that the fair tax would be good for the country. It really would. And I say, I'm really hoping that all of this political rhetoric that we've been hearing during this election cycle about no tax on this and no tax on that, and no tax on income, Social Security benefits, no tax on tips and stuff like that, no tax on overtime, even though that's not exactly what the bill says. It's a good idea just simply not to tax income at all. And anybody that does not support the fair tax, you just have to ask them what you like so much about the IRS.
Right. And we talk about it on the show with regard to, and there's information on the website too about this, but the Internal Revenue Service is shut down and goes away. And we've had people, that we've talked about on the program with regard to tax planners and the people that are that do your taxes for you, professional CPA, et cetera, who stand away from wanting to change the game because it would affect their business. And my thought would be, okay, well, now you can set up your business to not track and keep up with things that change with the Internal Revenue Service and income taxes. For tax planning for businesses, you can help them become more efficient in their processes internally and how they operate. And that would be a place where those businesses that are currently kind of pushing back on the, getting rid of the income tax because it would affect their business. Now they can turn their activities into something positive in strategical, management of a business's operation financially. And I think really make our companies stronger in the United States, because what happens when the fair tax goes on online. Those businesses become more valuable simply because they have better competition. They have the ability to do more with their time and creativity and management to actually be competitive in a global sense too, because of all of the finances, the money that's offshore would be coming back to our country and making things positive here.
Yep. Well, it's a myth that CPAs only do taxes. I mean, the
True.
CPAs provide just a plethora of services to businesses. And if they didn't have to tie themselves up dealing with the tax code, there's this a whole lot more that they could do to help. And I have heard that from a professional CPA who shall remain anonymous so he doesn't get any flack from his boss. But anyhow, that's going to wrap up this edition of Fair Tax Power Radio. We are slap out of time again. It was a pleasure being with you up there at WTOB. Next week, we'll actually show the video of what we did up there. And I don't know if we're going to take any pictures at Mr. Barbecue or not, but we are definitely enjoyed that. That is always a highlight of coming up there to North Carolina. But again, thank you for watching and sharing, liking the videos. We certainly appreciate that if you help us out in that regard. So until we meet again, I'm Bob Paxton.
I'm Bob Scarborough.
We are the FAIRtax Guys, reminding you the fair tax is the only truly fair tax, and once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
So what do you need from me to get these taxes collected?
Glad you asked, because there is a fair amount of information you need to be aware of.
That's your tax plan?
Oh, no, this is just the revisions for this year's tax plan. What I need from you is you need to keep track of all of your income, as well as any taxes that you've already paid, also any gifts that you received or gifts you've given to churches or charities or individuals throughout the entire year. Do you do any side jobs?
Every now and again.
Great, because there's some more information about that right here. Everything you need to know right here. So just simply compile that, send it in to us. Be careful, make sure there's no mistakes. If we do find mistakes were made, we can fine you or, throw you in jail. So you might want to be aware of that.
And what do you need from me?
As an individual, nothing. As a business owner, or if you're doing side jobs, yes, you would have to collect taxes on that, but, it's all right here.
Can I get